Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining Karen and myself here this evening as well. Look, the recovery in Europe is a hard-fought recovery. It is one that people have put a lot of funds in, the EU recovery plan, and Spain has put forward its plan as well. But now we have a devastating war on the continent, the first major war since 1945 as well. How much does that threaten to throw the Spanish recovery plan off target?
Well, actually, it's threatening all the European economy and also the world economy. But I believe that the fundamentals of the Spanish economy are quite strong. We're growing this first quarter of the year by 6.4% year on year. We're expecting to grow at 4.3% for the 2022. And also the employment rate is quite impressive. We have 20 million people already working in Spain, which is a figure that we didn't witness for a long period of time in our country. And actually, with the agenda of reforms that we are delivering and also the recovery plan and the European funds, we are ready to, first of all, to amortiguate all the economic consequences of this terrible war, but actually to modernize our economy and to increase our competitiveness and productivity. So, nevertheless, we are, of course, suffering these terrible consequences of the war. We are facing a very positive and optimistic and with confidence the near future for the Spanish economy.
While you sound somewhat upbeat, let me ask you more broadly then around monetary policy, because we had very explicit language from the ECB's Christine Lagarde. She was talking about the potential for July that is now on the table, and then a follow-up rate hike in September. If we talk about Spain more broadly, you've extended out debt maturities on loans, you've used the benefit of low interest rates and access to credit. Debt to income is fairly high when we talk about households as well across Spain. What is the threat, particularly for your country, as interest rates go up?
Well, I would say that it is indeed very important to have an alignment between the monetary policy and the fiscal policy in the European Union. So if we consider what happened with the pandemic and the economic response that we gave as Europe, I think this is the lesson that we have to take into account when we face the terrible consequences of the war in Ukraine. So that is why I think it's important to have, this, of course, ECB monetary policy aligned with the fiscal policy. And for that, public investment, European funds, modernization of our economy, going for a greener and digital economy in Europe and especially in Spain is crucial. And I would say that, of course, our forecast for the year 2025 is to have public deficit below 3%. And a public debt below 110%. So we are committed with fiscal consolidation, but nevertheless, we need to engage not only public investment but also private investment on the modernization of our economy. We're going definitely to a greener economy in Spain, and that is why we are engaging 40% of the total amount of the European funds to the green economy, to the green transition, so to say.
And yet, sir, the real economy, real incomes, corporate profits, the amount of money which is available to invest is being sived by this huge burst of inflation. And just to add to Karen's point, Spanish debt, which was priced at zero not so long ago, is now over 2%, a long way from where we were at the height of the crisis in 2009 to 2012, but even so, rising aggressively. Could that dent the ability of individuals, of corporations, of the Spanish state to spend money?
Well, we're not expecting that, really. I think that these are exogenous, I would say, factors, such as a war in Ukraine and the consequences in the European economy. But we are engaged with the fiscal consolidation. We are engaged with a very strong reform agenda, pension reforms, labor reform, educational and vocational training reform, climate change, and all this energetic transition in Spain towards this greener, I would say, energy system. So, we're very engaged with this agenda of reforms, structural reforms, and also all together with these public investments that are coming from the European Union funds, which will give us the opportunity to improve our competitiveness and productivity.
May I just follow up, actually, because there has been some criticism from the likes of Mr. Galán at Iberdrola, who, and I've listened to him and spoken to him for many years, and I think he's a wonderful voice for renewables and for the transition that you want from Spain, sir, as well. But he has criticised the policy initiatives which have put caps on prices rather than actually letting the market actually create a more favourable environment for renewables. Rather than spending that money on price caps for hydrocarbons, actually let's invest this in renewables.
Well, I would say I respect Mr. Galán's opinions, but it's definitely, I believe that the European Union energy market is not well designed, and it doesn't respond to this stress that this energy crisis coming or explained by this terrible war our economy is suffering, not only the Spanish economy but the European economy. So what we said, okay, is we don't have strong interconnections with the European Union energy market. Secondly, our renewable installed capacity is represent more or less 57%. So we have a very strong presence of renewables, which are, I would say, more competitive than gas nowadays. And secondly, we're not interconnected. So we reached this agreement with the European Commission in order to create a temporary cap of gas price for electricity generation. And this is going to reduce the electricity bill for enterprises, for industry, and for citizens more or less 40%. So we're expecting to reduce at least the inflationary pressure coming from the energy prices, and I think it's going to be, something that it will help our economy. But finally, this is just the beginning of a big reflection that we need to face at the European level, which is how do we adapt our energy system to another fundamentals which are more aligned with the renewable energy and not with the grass and fossil energy.
Before we get into that, let me ask you more short term, because Europeans are talking about some form of an oil embargo, but we know there are challenges with inflation and very high energy prices already. Where do you think we're at? How likely is it that there will be an oil embargo on Russia soon?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's important to keep in mind that Putin made a terrible mistake. He undermined the response by the Ukrainian government and people. And secondly, he undermined the possibility to have a European Union united. And not only the European Union, but also the NATO allies, and I would say most of the large number of countries in the world against this terrible crisis and of course, war. So really what I think it is important to keep the unity among member states of the European Union and also the international community. So far we reached to keep that unity. We are now negotiating among member states of the European Union the second patch of economic sanctions, but I believe that we will have that agreement soon. And this is something that, of course, is going to cost us, and is already doing so, because we are, suffering through this hike of gas and fuel and electricity prices. But I think that if we keep the unity, we will, I would say, stop all this terrible war and the economic consequences of the war.
Prime Minister, you do have a medium-term plan, and this is to become the battery of Europe, as you talk about working on terminals to export LNG to the rest of the continent, storage as well. But something puzzles me slightly here, because you're caught between the geopolitics of Morocco and Algeria. So it sort of begs the question, are you substituting one unstable supplier for another down the track?
Not at all. I think that Spain and the Iberian Peninsula, and I would say the Southern Europe, we have a chance to provide an answer to this energy dependence of Russian fossil energy. So I think that not many people knows, but Spain's represent 37% of the total regasification capacity of the European Union. The Iberian Peninsula concentrate close to 50% of our LNG storage for all the European Union. And the only problem that we have is the interconnection. And that is why I think it was very important that the Commission made a clear statement that we need to increase and to intensify the interconnections from the Iberian Peninsula with the European energy market. And secondly, I think it's also very important not to only think about gas, but also how the Iberian Peninsula could provide renewable energy, for instance, renewable hydrogen to the European Union. So at the end of the day, this war also gave us a very important lesson, which is that renewable energy, hydrogen, energy efficiency is not only a great ally for countries and economies to tackle the climate change effects, but also in this very complex and very uncertain geopolitical scenario that will provide us also means to increase our resilience and autonomy.
Prime Minister, final question from me. Very interesting you said about the Western unity now, and it's hard to argue that the EU looks very unified on this issue. NATO looks very unified. G7 looks very unified, and it's an issue I brought up with Josep Borrell as well, because I think the battle now, despite what you just said about large countries around the world decrying what the Russians have done, I think the battle for the hearts and minds of the rest of the world is very live and very clear and present as well. Spain has to use its influence in large parts of the world to try and sway countries to understand the Western point of view. I don't think the battle of the hearts and minds has been won yet, but you think it's that there are very positive moves on that front?
I think indeed you have a point on this. I think that it is important to share with the rest of our allies abroad, I would say the Western countries and the Western community, the need to stop Putin. This is not a European affair. This is not a question of a war between Ukraine and Russia. This put into question the international order. One of the main pillars of our current international order is to respect territorial integrity and national sovereignty. And this is put it into question by a member of the Security Council of the United Nations. So I think it's important to share with our allies this reflection, also to be empathetic. I think that it is indeed very important for the international community not only to be united against Putin, to be united giving a humanitarian response to the Ukrainians, but also to give means and social solutions and economic solutions to those countries most vulnerable to potential crises such as the food crisis that we're already witnessing.
If I can just follow up on this, day one here in Davos, the reaction seemed to be that the Russian aggression has been a win for democracies. But further down the line, as we piece this together and we talk about, your government, there's been a little bit of instability around a cybersecurity scandal. You put the inflationary forces into the mix as well, and potentially recession down the track for some economies at some point, maybe 2023. We know recessions can give leverage to the populace. Is that going to be a problem for Spain, for Europe, where we have the populace coming back at some point because of all of these challenges?
I think that you have a point. I think it's important to keep in mind as a European Union that we need to give social answers to the economic consequences of this war. And that is why I think it's important to have aligned monetary policy with the fiscal policy. And this is what we are so far doing in the European Union. And I'm very glad to see the unity among member states and also under the leadership of the European Commission. So, yes, I think that this is a risk, but I think that democracy at the end of the day will prevail. It will prevail inside the European Union, but also against Putin. Because at the end of the day, this war is not only about Ukrainian, it's also about how Putin's fear the consolidation of a political project which is founded on fundamental rights, democracy, freedom, and so on and so forth. And this is something that we need to keep in mind in order to see the dimension of the threat and the challenge that we have ahead.
A very strong message to close out on, Prime Minister. Thank you so much for joining us on CNBC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.